Welcome, guys. F1 hasn't even fully started its brand new 2026 engine regulation era, and we're already moving away from it. The sport pushed harder than ever for electrification. They wanted to go to a near 50-50 split between the engine and the battery. And just 4 races in, after the drivers complaining, the fans hating it, the FIA have confirmed that by 2030 at the earliest, we'll be looking at going to V8s. What's gone so wrong? Why has F1 suddenly made one of the biggest U-turns in modern F1 history? Let's get to it. Firstly, if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button for further videos. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Let's go through the history of how the F1 engine has evolved over the years to see how we've got to where we've got to today. And we'll talk about the good old days, the V12 engine in the early mid-90s. We then went to the V10 with the probably one of the best engine sounds I've heard personally in my own ears. It was super special. The V8s, they were just pure performance. We even got to a point where teams were building just a single qualifying engine just for the qualifying session. That was the good old days of the T car, the spare car. And now literally engines lasted just one weekend. They had massive, nearly 20,000 RPM. It became the identity of F1. I remember going to an event where F1 came to London back in 2004. I was 3-4 blocks away from where I might see the cars, and one of the engines revved up, and boy, I heard the rumble in the chest. And that's what just brought the love of the sport home. It was special. But then I guess F1 changed, the world changed, and we got the massive financial crisis. And then I think F1 had to change its directions. We had big teams leave, and suddenly cost and manufacturing interests became an efficiency, sustainability, road relevance, all came to the fore. And then we've just seen the development of the engines move completely away. We've gone to 2014 hybrid engine eras, V6 turbos, 1.6 litre V6 turbos. And it was just extremely advanced engineering. We got the MGUH, MGUK. It was, well, engineering brilliance, but we kind of lost the soul of F1. And then for 2026, they went even further. They went for the 50-50 split, and it's just, well, it's clearly not worked. 4 races in, despite a interview round and a massive sort of PR stunt or PR saving stunt from the head of F1, Stefano Domenicali, sort of saying, actually, fans love this formula. It's fantastic, and well, really, it's not that fantastic, because by race 4, you've already got the FIA confirming that actually, if the teams all agree, and this is what we want, by 2030, we'll have the V8 engines. And if it's not agreed by all the teams by 2030, the FIA will bring in V8 engines back by 2031. Now, it's not been all bad, and that's probably why we can move to the full V8s by 2030, because it's been the huge push on the sustainable fuel side of F1 that's kind of been overlooked in how bad the whole regulations are. But I think it's because of just the massive push that they had towards the sustainable fuels, which has now reignited this talk of, well, actually, we don't need all this battery stuff. And if we are looking at a green F1 and we're talking about the whole electrification of F1 to save the planet, well, we've kind of done that, but not with the battery, because actually once the battery is done with, it's buried in the hole in the ground, and we're just waiting for a natural disaster. And we'll find out in due course the science behind putting batteries in the ground and the damage that will cause to the earth. We've got sustainable fuels and V8s, and we don't need any of this battery stuff, and we can still be green by 2030. Imagine this is just year 1 of 100% sustainable fuels. The efficiency of them is yet to prove. The quality of it will improve. And by 2030, we might even look at V8s thinking, well, we probably could have gone back to the V10s. And that's where the key part of this video really is going to talk about is, have the regulations for 26 been just too short-sighted in the direction that F1 needed to go? And did they hit the nail on the head? But in the wrong way, really, because we went for full attack on the battery side, and actually that's not the way the world is moving forward. And clearly, we've still got elements of cost saving. We've still got the road relevant side of things to consider. But it looks like finally we've got some common sense coming in, because really every bit of this regulation, of the way it's been driven by the drivers, the teams, the viewing of it is just gone really at the core of the sport. And if you watch my video not too long ago about these regulations really killing the racing, I'll talk more in detail of how it has done that there, but they've just gone the wrong way. And they actually, thankfully, very early on, have decided that the 50-50 split was wrong, despite not saying that, but all the actions have said that they clearly were wrong. By 2027, they will move away from a 50-50 split engine. We're going to nearly a 60-70% to 60-40, 70-30 split. The power that we're losing out of the battery, or that we're trying to fill up the battery with, is not going to be longer 350 kilowatt. We're looking at nearly 400-500 kilowatts. So they can save more battery, but actually we're going to increase the power coming from the combustion engine also. And I think that's in the bid to step it up to get back to the V8 engines that we see. And I think it was 2009-10 that we got the V8 engines in, or was it 2006? I think it was 2006 we went to the V8s from the V10s of 2004 and 5. And well, yeah, we'll see no more harvesting, lift and coast, energy management, and we've got the sort of weird racing dynamics that we've had over the first 3 Grand Prix. Miami clearly wasn't that bad, but that was going to be one of the best races for the current regulations anyway. And I'm sure we'll see more horrible races this season. But thank God, the criticism of Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri have shown they hold weight, the driver's voice, and who more than the multiple world champion Max Verstappen. And if you want to see and talk about driver pull, just look what he's done at the Nürburgring this weekend, where he's going to race the 24-hour event. It's the first time in its history that it's ever been sold out, and that's only down to one man, and that's Max Verstappen. So it shows what a pull the driver can do. The timing of that for him, and effectively can be look at the saviour of F1 now, can't he, Max Verstappen, with this new change of rules and the FIA's U-turn. Max and others can be claimed the hero and the champions of that announcement. The biggest headline really was Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president. He sort of said, look, V8 engines are coming back. It's a definite, possibly by 2030, probably by 2031. I think he jumped the gun a little bit on all the teams. I think that F1 was probably heading there anyway, with the talk of how good the sustainable fuels element side of things has been. Clearly, the manufacturers need agreeing on that to get it in by 2030. But we've already heard Cadillac would welcome the V8s. Audi, who were big on getting rid of the MGU-H, and Honda as well, actually, who came back into the sport, and Audi as well, like big investment into the sport as a knockout microphone. All three of them have come straight out of the gun and said, actually, we'd all welcome V8 engines. Not heard massive detail of what Honda really wished to do on this front, but I know from the other side of life, outside of F1 and the racing side of life, that Honda were already looking to move away from the electrification of their cars, because they said it's not really the direction that the world needs to go in, and they were looking at alternatives to the electric car. So we'll see that, and F1 probably could be the driver of that. But the two teams that you look on the face of it that you thought, oh, actually, they came back into F1 really on the bounce, on the premise of this 50-50 split, the more energy coming through the battery, and the road relevance of that, being a big driver for them coming back into the sport. Quite quickly on, they've already sort of said, yeah, we'd actually like the V8s. And is that a sign of because of how good and effective the sustainable fuels has been? Who knows? Why does F1 want the V8s back? I think the V6 hybrid era has not really had the emotional impact of the V10s and the V8s. They were still something special. I mean, we've seen when they've done sort of test runs in various events, which they kind of rarely do now. I still remember when Renault's V10 was running around, I think it was around Spain. Fernando Alonso may have been in that, and you just sort of everybody stopping listening to the sound of a V8 engine, and absolutely admiring and taking that in. And it just brings back the rumble. If you hear these engines now, they're just not got it. And if you're new to F1 and never heard one, you kind of, it's hard to explain of what you're missing out on. That rumble that I felt as a young kid of a V10 engine, it was literally vibrating my chest. I could feel it in my rib cage. I was 4 blocks away from an F1 engine, which is just crazy. And they just sounded fantastic. Another thing is the simplicity of it. Obviously, we know that Audi have come back in for this electrification side of thing, but they wanted to drop, I think it was the MGU-H element of the electrical side of things. They're only interested in part elements. So if they go back to a V8, it is really a simple engine. It's not very complex. It's not very expensive. They aren't difficult to manage. They can be lighter, cheaper to build, and there's less any sort of worrying about this energy harvesting element of things. Will we get better racing? There's a chance of that, but some of the racing, I've got to say, in the first 3 Grand Prix, despite sort of being the false overtake narrative, some of the racing has been good, interesting, different to what we've seen in F1 over the years. It's kind of become a little bit like Marmite. You either absolutely love it or you hate it. But I think Miami showed that there needs to be some middle ground on this. It was really spectacular racing in Miami. The event went really, really well, and was a key driver moving away from this whole 50-50 and element split and the reliance, or we didn't see as many push button overtakes, to be honest with you. So that was a massive thing, and sort of straight off the back of that, we've seen the teams agree for 2027 already of a 60-40 split. Cost will be a huge thing. They no longer need to sort of spend a fortune on the battery or the hybrid systems, the MGU systems, which are massively complicated, and Audi, like I said, already wanted to drop them before they've come in. And we can see what they can do in reality with the V8s. Massively excited for that one. I think mostly across the board, everyone's accepted that. Toto Wolff's position won it, who's sort of it seems like he's got a strong grip on F1. He's always very pro F1, despite where there's things go wrong and you get others criticizing the sport. He's never one to do that. He's always been sort of very pro F1, and understandably so. He's got high stakes in the sport. But he said he'd welcome the V8 engines. But the key point really from his conversation is that they kind of needs to be real world relevance. Now, what does that mean? Will we, or do we even need a battery still? I think that's the key point of it. And like I said, the sustainable fuels may now be advanced enough that F1 no longer needs the battery. It doesn't need these huge electrical systems to justify being green as a sport. The 100% fuels, sustainable fuels that have come in for this year have also coming with smaller fuel tanks. They've got to, get that smaller amount of fuel to last longer. Helped, a lot of that is probably by the battery, so we probably will need to see bigger fuel tanks if we're going to see the fuel flow rate for the 2026 regulation, 27 regulations increase. So there'll still be elements that need to be tweaked on that, but clearly the sustainable fuels or 100% sustainable fuels is a very new technology, and like we know, in 2 or 3 years time that will change massively, and we'll see something completely different in the way they are, the efficiency of them, the carbon neutral effect of that, and we can probably see the combustion engine change and evolve by the time we get to the 2030s, and then the V8s will be green, and they can cover off this whole sustainable element of it, because they did want to go like 100% carbon neutral, didn't they, F1? And I think the target was potentially 2030. So I think there's more details on that if you want to know the exact dates, but that's still a potential there. The big problem with the 2026 regulations, well, they do look short-sighted now, don't they? And that's sort of the key part of this video is, well, why? Because the teams have spent hundreds of millions of dollars, pounds, nearly £1 billion preparing for the 2026 regulations. They were the biggest overhaul in regulations for years. It's the first time we've seen a aero and an engine regulations come in together in the same year. Audi joined partly because of this electrification. Honda committed again. Manufacturers developed around hybrid relevance, and now they're suddenly moving away from it by 2030 at the earliest completely. But we're already seeing they've gone away from the 50-50 split that they were, really excited about, to a 60-40 split by 2027, using more fuels. And it may have overcorrected towards the electrification of Formula One. And I think that's the big difference. And are they trying to find some middle ground, or they've just realized that actually with the sustainable fuels and what we've done, we can go completely the other way, which as a fan, and we've heard many fans talk about, we want to go away from the electrification of F1. We want a V10, V12 back in that car. I think that's still a long way off. V8, is it in the right direction? Most definitely. I'm sure we'll get naturally aspirated V8s by 2030 by the talk that's come out of all the manufacturers. And that's not just the current ones, that's the old ones as well. The sustainable fuels, like I said, will only improve. We probably will still get some electrification in there. We'll probably get smaller hybrid boost. How that will work, who knows? But if we can get rid of all that, we'll also talk about having lighter cars, smaller cars, and back to the 27, 28, 2007, 2008 cars, which were way smaller, way lighter. And every driver has since, we've got these huge big tanks that they drive around now. I've just sort of said we need to go back to them. We need the louder engines, simpler systems, and let the drivers do the driving and not just driving huge tech machines around. We could probably see some of the KERS style electrification back, rather than this whole full hybrid dependency of what we've seen over the last couple of years, and especially for this year. But will we get the old school F1 emotion back with the modern sustainability side of things? It looks like that's the dream the FIA is trying to sell. But the FIA has spent more, or the F1 have spent more than a decade chasing efficiency, electrification, road relevance. But now have they finally realized something pretty important, that it's the fans don't fall in love with efficiency charts. They fall in love with the noise, the speed, the danger, the risk, and the emotion of that is huge. And after years of understanding this hybrid complexity, F1's trying to bring the soul back into F1. Can they do that Will they do that? It looks like it's definitely on the cards. The V8 is definitely a step in the right direction. Will it be enough? We'll find out soon enough, but it looks like all the talk is that we're going back that way. And I, for one, am more than happy to see the back of these 2026 engines, because they've been an absolute disaster, and they've realised it less than 4 races, or just over 4 races in, which is, I think, of a hats off to the F1 and FIA for just sort of actually listening to the drivers, the fans, and realising they probably went too far in the wrong direction with the electrification of F1, and they need to go back to what F1 can really be. I think the underlying thing really here is, and the bit that probably most are not talking about, is probably how successful the sustainable fuels element has been within F1. That's allowed them to sort of go in hard on the talk for V8s as early as 2030 and 60-40 split by 2027. Will we see that reduce further? I mean, as we know now, the 26 or the regulations regarding the engines will and can be tweaked even race by race, isn't it? We've seen it pre-Miami. We've seen changes post-Miami, and there's still a long way to go in this season yet, but we could see probably a further reduction by 28, 29, and then to 30 to move away almost fully, going from 60, 70, 80% to back to the, the naturally aspirated engines and eventually V8s, and might they change their mind to go to V10s. The problem that they have, though, really is that they kind of are making the decisions on these things. They've got to give them nearly 3 years out because of the huge changes and the work that needs to be done on the engines to get them in the right place. But I mean, if we're talking V8s, it's way simpler than what we've or what they've had to do going on the electrification side of things. That's old technology. They understand how the sustainable fuels work now and will understand that further in the years to come. And so it's probably quicker that they can go to V8s. And I think that's probably why they probably don't need the 3 years lead time that we've seen previously when they've gone for other regulation change when it comes to engines. But they will need to make that decision pretty concrete and pretty quick. So expect more changes and confirmations on that. I would expect that probably definitely by the end of the F1 season. But the way the regulations are changing rapidly, race by race, it seems now, they're on the road to recovery of what's been, pretty dreadful PR for F1 in the first 3 races, especially with the lift of coast nonsense and this just fake overtake stuff, which is, like I said, a bit Marmite. But good news, F1 headed in the back in the right directions. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. As always, see you on the next one.